If you told me 4 years ago that love could feel like a slow unraveling rather than a grand story, I would have laughed. Back then, everything seemed certain. I had a steady career in software engineering, my first apartment downtown, and a heart that still believed effort could fix anything. That was before Charles Cole. I met him at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was charming without trying to be the kind of man who made you believe every word was meant just for you. We spent that night laughing over bad karaoke, arguing about our favorite movies, and finishing each other's sentences like we'd known each other forever. He worked in marketing, ambitious, clever, always chasing the next idea. When he smiled at me across the table, it felt like possibility itself had leaned closer. A week later, he asked me out. 2 months later, I was spending every other night at his apartment. He made me feel seen, understood. For a while, it was the kind of connection people post about online and call soulmate energy. Early on, Charles told me about his ex, Sophie. They dated for 2 years in college. It ended messy. He said lots of tears, drama, emotional highs and lows. She's impulsive, unpredictable, he told me one night, shaking his head. I loved her, but she loved chaos more than me. I remember feeling lucky that he wanted something different now. He said I was stable, grounded, his peace. And I wore that label proudly, not realizing then how heavy it would become. For the first year, we were good. We cooked together, took weekend trips, built routines. I supported him through a rough patch when his agency cut staff and he lost his job. He was shaken, questioning his worth, but I reminded him he'd find something better. I covered rent for 2 months, helped him rework his portfolio, even introduced him to a former colleague who got him an interview. I believed in him like it was a full-time job. And then little by little, Sophie slipped back into our lives. It started innocently enough, her name appearing on his phone screen during dinner. He said she'd sent a funny meme from their old group chat. We're still friends, that's all, he explained casually, eyes never leaving his plate. I told myself it was harmless. People can stay friends with on each other's posts. Heart emojis, inside jokes I didn't understand. I'd notice him smiling at his phone late at night, that private kind of smile people make when nostalgia whispers louder than common sense. One night we were watching a movie on the couch when Sophie's name lit up again. He chuckled at something she'd said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I tried to keep my tone light. Still pretty close with her, huh? He looked up slightly defensive. She's just a friend, Judith. You don't have to get jealous every time a woman texts me. I'm not jealous, I said carefully. But maybe it's weird. You used to date her. He sighed, setting the phone down. Not everything's about you feeling insecure. Sophie and I have history, sure, but that doesn't mean anything now. You trust me, don't you? I did, or at least I wanted to. So I nodded even though my stomach twisted. That became our pattern. He'd downplay it, and I'd swallow the discomfort. The next week, she tagged him in an old throwback photo, some beach trip from their college days, both of them grinning, his arms around her. When I asked why he didn't untag himself, he laughed. Why would I? It's just a memory. Memories, I realize, can be sharp things when you're the one standing outside them. I started noticing more subtle changes. He'd talk about Sophie's adventures, her new travel blog, the places she'd been. She's always chasing something new, he said almost wistfully. That's what I used to love about her. I smiled, but inside, something cracked. The next day, I found myself staring at my reflection, wondering when steady had started sounding like boring. Still, I stayed. Because that's what love teaches you to do. Wait, hope, believe the storm will pass. By our second year together, I received an email that should have changed everything, Amsterdam. My company offered me a senior developer position overseas, higher pay, creative freedom, a chance to work on projects I dreamed about. My heart raced as I told him, expecting excitement. Instead, he frowned. Amsterdam. That's far. I just got my new job, and I'm finally in a good rhythm here. You're really going to leave all that for a maybe? It's not a maybe, I said softly. It's my dream job. He hesitated, then added, Sophie's been helping me adjust. I can't just walk away from everything right now. I remember that moment vividly, the quiet way he said her name like it meant home. That night I turned down Amsterdam. I told myself love was about compromise, but deep down it felt more like surrender. He thanked me, hugged me tight, and whispered, You're my rock. I smiled against his shoulder. But somewhere inside, I knew rocks don't grow, they just endure. As months passed, our closeness faded into routine. He started spending more evenings catching up with friends, which I learned later often included Sophie. When I asked about it, he rolled his eyes. God, Judith, stop policing my friendships. You're making this exhausting. I wanted to shout to ask why loyalty suddenly sounded like control, but I didn't. I just nodded, letting silence become my defense. One night I woke up to find him gone from bed. He was on the balcony phone, in hand, whispering, laughing softly. When I asked who he was talking to, he said, "Work stuff. Go back to sleep." I didn't. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing I was beginning to know the taste of loneliness, even while sharing a bed. The next morning, he kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. Don't overthink, okay? But something inside me already had. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't always arrive as a confession. Sometimes it drips slowly through small lies, soft reassurances, and half smiles that never reach the eyes. That was the morning I opened my laptop and saw a new message: Amsterdam's offer had been renewed. A second chance. And for the first time, I didn't know whether to tell him. I thought I was building a future with him. Turns out I was just keeping the door open for his past. When that second email from Amsterdam arrived, my hands trembled. It wasn't just an offer, it was a reminder that I still had a life of my own to live. The company wanted me to lead a new AI division, all expenses covered, relocation package, the works. My boss even wrote, "You turned this down once. We're offering it again because we believe in you." I read that line over and over while Charles snored softly beside me. It felt like the universe was whispering, "Are you sure you want to keep shrinking for someone who never notices?" But I didn't accept it. Not yet. I waited until the weekend to bring it up. We were cooking dinner, pasta, his favorite, and I said casually, "The Amsterdam team reached out again. They still want me." Charles looked up from the stove, frowning slightly. "Again, I thought we talked about this." "We did, but it's a great opportunity. They're offering even more this time." He stirred the sauce slowly, avoiding eye contact. "You really want to move halfway across the world and start over? For what, a pay raise?" "It's not just about money, Charles," I said gently. "It's about growth. It's something I've worked for my whole career." He sighed, setting the spoon down. "Judith, I just got things back on track here. My job's stable, my routine's good. And what about our relationship? You'd be leaving me behind." I tried to sound reasonable. "You could come with me. We could make it an adventure together." He chuckled humorlessly. "You know I can't just pick up and leave like that. Sophie's still helping me with the brand campaign at work. It's a big deal for both of us." Sophie again. Always Sophie. My chest tightened. "You're saying no to our future because your ex is helping you with a project." He looked offended. "Wow. That's not fair. She's just a coworker now. You're twisting this into something it's not." I forced a smile, swallowing everything I wanted to say. "You're right. I'm probably overthinking." Later that night, I sat at my desk, staring at the email draft empty. Except for one sentence blinking on the screen, I respectfully declined the offer. My mouse hovered over send, and I did it. A single click, a single moment that changed everything. Charles came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "You did the right thing, babe," he whispered. "You're my constant, my safe place." I leaned back into him mechanically, but the words stung more than they soothed. Safe place. Constant. Rock. Every compliment he gave me felt like a box tightening around my ribs. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering when love had started to feel like slow suffocation. Over the next few weeks, life returned to its dull rhythm. I went to work, came home cooked, cleaned, smiled. Charles texted Sophie often, sometimes right in front of me. When I looked uncomfortable, he'd smirk. Still jealous. "Come on, Judith. You've got to be more confident than that." I stopped bringing it up, stopped asking, stopped expecting honesty, but I couldn't stop noticing. The way he'd light up when Sophie posted a new picture, the way his laughter changed when he mentioned her name, the way he forgot the small things about me, how I liked my coffee, the playlist I. Love was fading, but habit kept me tethered. Then came the third offer. Same company, same position. Only this time, the email subject line read, "Final call, Amsterdam. Relocation opportunity, deadline, 48 hours." I opened it in silence, feeling my pulse in my throat. When Charles came home that night, I decided to tell him. Maybe deep down, I hoped he'd surprise me, say yes, say he'd go with me this time. Charles Usher began. As we sat down for dinner, they offered Amsterdam again. "It's the last time. I need to decide by tomorrow." He froze mid-bite. "You're still thinking about that, Judith. We've been over this." He cut me off, his voice rising. "Why can't you just be happy here? You've got a good job. We've got each other. Why chase something that's just going to ruin what we have?" Because what we have, I said quietly, feels like it's standing still. He stared at me for a long moment, then laughed, shaking his head. You sound like Sophie, always restless, never satisfied. Her name hung between us like a slap. I took a breath. Charles, if we're serious about this relationship, I need you to set boundaries. I can't keep pretending Sophie doesn't exist between us. He leaned back, arms crossed. Boundaries. You mean cutting off my friend because you're insecure. That's not what I said. It's what you mean, he snapped. I'm not cutting her off just because you can't handle me having a past. Grow up, Judith. For a moment, the room went silent, except for the ticking clock on the wall. I stared at him, the man I once thought was kind, self-aware, mature, and realized he was none of those things when his ego felt cornered. Finally, I nodded. Fair point. He blinked, caught off guard. That's it? That's it. I stood, gathered our plates, and carried them to the sink. My hands shook, but my voice didn't. After he went to bed, I opened my laptop again. The Amsterdam email was still there, waiting like a quiet promise. Without hesitation this time, I clicked accept. A small pop-up appeared. Your confirmation has been received. Welcome aboard. And just like that, I was free. No announcement, no fight, no tears. Just a decision made in silence, the kind that doesn't feel like escape, but like coming home to yourself. Over the next few days, I started planning. I didn't tell Charles. I sublet the apartment to a grad student who'd move in after I left. Every small act felt like reclaiming oxygen. Charles, meanwhile, acted as if everything was fine. He scrolled through Sophie's photos, laughed at her jokes, and called me his rock. And every time he said it, I smiled politely, thinking rocks don't fly, but I will. The night before my flight confirmation came through, I walked out to the balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below me. He was asleep, phone buzzing softly beside him, Sophie's name flashing across the screen. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. Sometimes love doesn't sound like support, I wrote in my journal that night. It sounds like silence while your own dreams die quietly. And with that, I closed the notebook, shut down my computer, and turned off the light. Because tomorrow my life would begin again. 2 weeks before my flight, the air in our apartment felt heavier than ever, like even the walls knew something was ending. Charles still thought everything was normal. He'd hum in the shower, joke over breakfast, kiss my forehead before leaving for work. I matched his calmness, but mine wasn't love anymore. It was a mask. He didn't notice the small things, how I'd stopped buying groceries for two, how the framed pictures had quietly disappeared from the shelves, how my laptop was always open to files labeled relocation logistics. In his world, I was still the stable girlfriend, the woman who forgave the woman who stayed. But inside, I was already gone. It was strange the moment you stop fighting for something, you finally see it for what it really is. I saw how he'd talk about Sophie now, without hesitation, like I had earned the privilege of hearing about their friendship. I saw how he compared us without realizing. Sophie always pushed me out of my comfort zone, he'd say wistfully. You and I, we're just so steady. Steady, predictable, safe, all words that once felt like love, now sounding like pity. One night, I came home from work to find him on the couch scrolling through photos. Sophie's latest post, her laughing in the rain somewhere in Bali, captioned, "Chasing chaos again." He smiled to himself, that same half grin I hadn't seen in months. I stood there quietly until he noticed me. Hey, I said softly, do you ever think about how you look at her pictures? He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, you look at them like she still matters. He set his phone down, his tone shifting. Oh God, Judith, not this again? This again, I repeated, my voice calm. You mean me asking for basic respect? He laughed under his breath. You sound ridiculous. She's a friend. That's it. I held his gaze. Friends don't flirt through memories. He stood, running a hand through his hair. You're so dramatic lately. Maybe you should talk to someone. This insecurity thing is getting worse. And that was the moment something inside me cracked, not loud or sudden, just a quiet break that didn't heal. I didn't argue. I just said, You're right. I should talk to someone. That night, I texted my therapist friend Daniel, who'd been checking in since Charles's first job loss. He called immediately. Judith, you sound exhausted, he said gently. I am, I admitted. But I think I'm also waking up. He stayed quiet, letting the silence do the work. You know, I said after a while I turned down Amsterdam for him. Twice. He didn't even say thank you the second time. That's not love, Danielle said softly. That's convenience. Those words stayed with me. Convenience. I was the soft landing he needed between his chaos and his ego. The next morning I woke up before him. The sun had barely risen, painting the walls gold. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and reread the relocation documents. The countdown was real now, flight in 13 days. Charles stumbled into the kitchen, yawning. Morning, he said, leaning in for a kiss. I stepped back slightly, pretending to grab something from the counter. He didn't notice. He never did. Hey, he said as he poured his coffee. Sophie wants to grab lunch today. She's going through some stuff. You cool with that? I didn't even look up. Do whatever makes you happy. He blinked. Really no lecture this time. No lecture, I said simply. You deserve to be around people who make you feel alive. He laughed, thinking I was being sarcastic. You're weird today. Maybe I was, or maybe I was finally sane. That night he came home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. He started telling me stories about their lunch, how Sophie was lost, but brave, how she reminded him of his old self. I nodded, as if listening to a stranger. When he finished, I asked quietly, Charles, are you happy with me? He hesitated. What kind of question is that? A real one. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You're good for me, Judith. You're steady supportive. But sometimes, it feels like you don't get me anymore. Sophie and I, we just talk about things you don't care about. There it was, the truth, soft and cruel. I smiled faintly. I see. He frowned. See what? That you're already halfway gone. He looked confused, maybe even a little guilty, but not enough to say what mattered. Instead, he shrugged. I think we both need space. You've been kind of intense lately. Maybe take a break, focus on yourself. I almost laughed. He thought this was his idea. Fair point, I said again, my tone even. He looked at me warily. You always say that. What does it mean? It means I said you're right about everything. He nodded, relieved, and went to bed early. I sat in the quiet for a long time after that. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the soft sound of rain starting against the window. When I finally moved, it was to open my laptop one more time. There was the flight confirmation. Seat 14A, Amsterdam. Departure 2 weeks from today. I packed my first box that night. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm, Charles leaving earlier, coming home later. Me smiling through the motions. When he mentioned having dinner with Sophie again, I said nothing. He mistook my silence for permission. The night before, she posted a picture of them together, laughing at some dimly lit bar. He came home smelling of whiskey and guilt. He didn't say a word, and neither did I. I lay awake beside him, counting the hours. In the morning, I'd start shipping my things, because I wasn't his home anymore, and I finally understood I didn't need to be. As I sealed another cardboard box with tape, a strange peace washed over me. It wasn't the peace of being done fighting. It was the peace of realizing the fight had never been fair. He still didn't know I was leaving, but soon he would. It wasn't anger that burned, I wrote in my journal that night. It was the cold clarity that follows the fire. And with that, I turned the page, folded it closed, and whispered to myself, this time, I'm choosing me. 2 weeks later, I was gone. The morning of my flight, Charles still didn't know. He thought I was attending a work conference out of state, a harmless lie that made my sudden absence easier to explain. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Take care of yourself. I didn't sign it. He didn't deserve my name as closure. By the time his alarm went off, I was already at the airport boarding a plane bound for Amsterdam. I watched the city disappear below the clouds and felt something I hadn't felt in years light. Freedom didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly with steady breaths and the soft hum of jet engines carrying me away from the version of myself that once begged to be chosen. Amsterdam felt like a dream I'd forgotten I'd once had. The air smelled of coffee and rain. The canals shimmered like threads of silver weaving between old buildings that leaned toward one another as if sharing secrets. My new apartment overlooked a park. Mornings began with sunlight spilling through wide windows, evenings with the sound of bicycles whirring past below. For the first time, I didn't plan around anyone. I just lived. Work was intense but fulfilling. My new team welcomed me like I'd always belonged. They asked questions, valued my ideas. I led meetings, built prototypes, stayed late because I wanted to, not because I was proving my worth to someone waiting at home. It felt foreign to be proud of myself again. On weekends, I'd take long walks along the canals, stop at markets for tulips, sit in small cafes with my notebook. Sometimes I'd write about the version of me who had stayed behind, and each time she seemed more like a stranger. A month passed before I heard from anyone back home. A friend texted me out of the blue. Judith, did you see Charles's new post? He's dating Sophie again. I stared at the screen for a moment, then smiled faintly. Of course he was. Predictable to the end. I didn't respond. I just turned my phone over, took a sip of my latte, and went back to reading. But life has a way of keeping you informed, whether you ask for it or not. A few weeks later, another message came from a mutual friend. So, you probably don't care, but Charles and Sophie quit their jobs. They're trying to be travel vloggers now. He's been borrowing money from people. It's getting weird. I laughed quietly, not cruelly, just in disbelief at how patterns repeat. It turned out that Sophie hadn't changed much since college. She still chased excitement like it was oxygen, still craved the rush of being admired, still believed in shortcuts disguised as passion. Charles, forever drawn to her chaos, followed willingly. Their posts started off romantic beaches, sunsets, big smiles. Then came the cracks, captions about rough patches and trust issues vague enough for sympathy, transparent enough for anyone who'd lived through it. Eventually, the updates stopped altogether. One evening, I got a message from Daniel, the therapist friend who'd been my quiet lifeline. Not to stir the past, he wrote, but Charles has been reaching out to people. Seems Sophie maxed out his credit cards and left him mid-trip. He's back home jobless. Guess karma finally booked a round trip. I stared at my phone, the faintest hint of sadness flickering through me. Not pity, just recognition. He had chosen the chaos he once complained about, and it had devoured him whole. I looked out my window, then rain streaking down the glass tram bells ringing faintly in the distance, and felt something close to gratitude. Not for his pain, but for my peace. A few months later, during a lunch break at work, I scrolled through an email from HR confirming my promotion. Lead developer, it read. I smiled, thinking how far I'd come since those nights of staying up late, begging for scraps of validation from someone who called me too controlling. I was building something now, not for him, not for anyone else, but for me. And the best part, I didn't have to prove that I was worthy of love just because I was stable. I'd finally learned that stability wasn't boring. It was freedom. Then one morning, as sunlight streamed through my window, I opened my inbox and froze. An email from an unfamiliar address. Subject from Charles. Body. Hey, I heard you're in Amsterdam. Congrats on everything. I know I don't deserve a reply, but I wanted to say, you were right about everything. Sophie was a mistake. I'm sorry. I read it twice, then deleted it without answering. No anger, no satisfaction, just closure, clean, silent, final. A few weeks later, I met some coworkers for drinks. We sat by the canal, laughter mingling with the sound of water against stone. At one point, someone asked, so what made you move here, Judith? I thought for a moment, then said, a breakup. Best one I've ever had. They laughed, and so did I. When I walked home that night, I paused on a bridge and watched my reflection ripple across the water. The city lights shimmered like constellations below me. It hit me then, this was what peace looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the absence of needing someone else to fix it. I whispered softly to myself, almost like a vow I won't apologize again for choosing myself. The next day, I deleted the last backup folder labeled Charles. Photos, messages, memories gone. And when the screen went blank, I didn't feel emptiness. I felt space. Weeks later, another message from a mutual friend popped up, uninvited but harmless. Sophie's gone. Charles is trying to rebuild. He tells people you abandoned him. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't. People like Charles always need a villain. I'd just finally stopped auditioning for the part. That night, I wrote one last journal entry before closing it for good. Karma doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't chase, it waits. And sometimes when it finally arrives, it doesn't look like revenge. It looks like freedom. I turned off the light, smiled in the dark, and let the sound of the rain carry me to sleep. Because this time, there was no waiting for anyone to come home. I was already there. It had been nearly 6 months since I'd left. Amsterdam had become my home in every way that mattered. My mornings started with soft music and coffee by the window. I rode my bike to work through tree-lined streets, nodding to the same bakery owner who waved every day. My life was calm, full, and quietly mine. Then, one afternoon, I opened my work inbox and saw a name I hadn't expected to ever see again. From unknown sender subject, please read Judith. My chest tightened before I even clicked. Hey, it's Charles. I got your work email from a mutual friend. Please don't be mad. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve how I treated you. Sophie was not what I thought. She left me in debt, Judith. She lied, cheated, ruined my job. I miss what we had. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm begging you, just reply, even if it's to say you hate me. I stared at the screen for a long time. His words looked sincere, desperate even. But all I could think was how quiet the apartment felt, peaceful, undisturbed. I didn't reply. I closed the email and went back to work. That evening, a new message arrived, then another, then a third from a different address. Judith, please, I know you're reading these. You can't ignore me forever. I just need closure. Closure. The word that people use when what they really mean is control. I archived them all. A week later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I declined it. Then another. Then a voicemail, his voice shaking and tired. I know I messed up. I lost everything. Sophie's gone. My family's ashamed. I just need to talk. Please. I listened to it once, deleted it, and sat in silence for a while. There was a time when his pain would have pulled me back. But I wasn't that woman anymore. 2 days later, another familiar name popped up, Lisa, his sister. Wow, Judith. You really don't care, do you? He's falling apart. You're heartless. After everything he did for you, you can't even answer his messages. I almost laughed at the irony. Everything he did for me, I typed a single line, then deleted it. I wouldn't explain myself to people who'd never understood me in the first place. But Charles didn't stop. His emails became longer, guiltier, full of self-pity and half-truths. I thought you were better than this. You said you cared about people. I guess that was a lie, too. Sophie destroyed me, but you're the one who's really cruel. Every line reeked of the same old manipulation, repackaged as remorse. It didn't sting this time. It just confirmed what I already knew. People like him don't apologize because they've changed. They apologize because their safety net is gone. I stopped opening the messages. My spam folder became a graveyard of second chances I'd never grant. Months later, I flew home for the first time, a short visit for a mutual friend's wedding. The ceremony was small, held in a countryside vineyard, all golden light and string music. I felt like a ghost from another life stepping into a story that had already ended. I was talking with some old coworkers near the bar when I saw him. Charles. He looked thinner, older, like life had wrung him out. His suit didn't quite fit, and his eyes darted around until they found me. For a second I saw recognition, then guilt, then hope. He walked over, clutching a glass, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Judith, he said quietly, you look amazing. I smiled politely. Hi, Charles. He swallowed. I didn't think you'd come. I wasn't planning to, I replied, but it's a good venue. He laughed awkwardly. Yeah, it is. Then his expression shifted, softening into something rehearsed. I've wanted to talk to you for months. You never answered. I guess I can't blame you. I nodded slightly. No, you can't. He sighed, eyes glistening. I lost everything after you left. Sophie drained me dry emotionally, financially. She turned out to be a nightmare. I just kept thinking about how different you were, how good you were for me. His voice cracked, and for a fleeting moment, I almost pitied him. But pity isn't love. It's distance disguised as compassion. I said calmly, I didn't leave you because of Sophie Charles. I left because of you. He blinked confused. Because of me? Because you made me small, I said. Because you convinced me that compromise was love. Because every time I had a dream, you called it selfish. And I believed you. He stared at me like he'd been slapped. I was stupid, Judith. I know that now. Please, can't we start over? I've changed. I swear I have. I smiled faintly, setting my drink down. No, Charles. You've fallen apart. That's not the same thing as changing. His face twisted, pride flaring up in the ruins of his dignity. You're so cold now. You used to care. I still care, I said softly. Just not about your redemption. The words landed between us like quiet thunder. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Around us, laughter and music filled the air. A new couple was dancing light, reflecting off her veil. The contrast was poetic a wedding as the backdrop to our final goodbye. Finally, he whispered, You'll regret this someday. I met his eyes calm and unshaken. I already did once. Never again. Then I turned away. I didn't look back, not even when I heard him mutter something to his sister. Later that night, while walking to my car, I paused to breathe in the cool air. The sky was filled with stars, and for a second I thought of all the versions of myself I'd shed to get here. The girl who stayed, the woman who waited, the one who finally left. I whispered to the night, not for him, but for me. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with release. Back in Amsterdam a week later, I met someone new. He wasn't charming or loud. He didn't make grand promises. He just showed up consistently, quietly, honestly. When he asked about my past, I told him the truth. It taught me what peace looks like, and I'm not willing to lose it again. He smiled and said, Then we'll keep it together. For the first time in years, I believed it. Sometimes I still get messages from mutual friends. Charles is trying to get his life together. Lisa says he talks about you all the time. I just nod, wish them well, and move on. Because I don't need to prove anything, not to him, not to anyone. My story isn't about heartbreak anymore. It's about choosing myself every single day. And if Karma ever needed a witness, I'd tell her this. He once said I was predictable, but peace, peace.